The night was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that presses on your chest and forces your heart to beat louder than it should. He stood in the dim light, torn between what he wanted and what he knew he should resist. Her eyes, luminous and steady, locked onto his, daring him, commanding him without a single word. When she finally spoke, her voice was velvet but edged with fire. "Pull my skirt higher," she said, every syllable a challenge. His throat went dry, his pulse a wild drum, and though his mind screamed of consequences, his hands obeyed. The air between them shifted, thick with hunger, with longing that had been buried for too long, a hunger too wild to tame. But he knew, even in that moment, that fire like this does not come without cost. Desire carries weight, and this weight was heavier than either of them could have imagined. What neither could see just yet was that their story would be less about fire consuming and more about what it meant to endure in the aftermath. He had met her by accident, though he would later wonder if accident was the wrong word. Perhaps fate, cruel and clever, had drawn them together. It was an ordinary afternoon, sunlight falling across the streets in tired slants, when he first noticed her. She wasn't the kind of woman one forgets after a casual glance. There was something in the way she carried herself, shoulders squared yet eyes full of a quiet weariness, as if she had lived too much in too short a time. She stood by the market stall, considering fruit with a seriousness that made him pause. Her hand brushed over apples, firm and decisive, but her expression betrayed 1,000 thoughts elsewhere. He caught himself staring longer than was polite, but when she lifted her eyes and met his, he felt as though she had stripped away every defense he had built. There was recognition there, though they had never met, though no words had been spoken. Recognition of wounds hidden deep. Recognition of loneliness. She walked away that day without another glance, but her presence lingered in his mind. He told himself it was nothing, just a passing intrigue, a fleeting face. But he noticed her again days later, and again the week after that. She became a thread woven into the background of his world, until the background no longer mattered. He started to look for her, and every time their paths crossed, the same unspoken current passed between them. It wasn't attraction in the simple, careless sense, it was something heavier. A pull that made his chest ache. A gravity he both feared and wanted. For a long while, he stayed silent. He was not a man who rushed into anything, least of all matters of the heart. His past had taught him that trust was fragile, that people had a way of promising forever and delivering betrayal instead. He carried those lessons like scars, invisible but tender. And she, though he did not know her story in detail, wore her past like armor. She laughed, but the laughter was quick, brittle. She smiled, but only with her lips, never her eyes. He wondered what had broken her, who had left their fingerprints across her soul. And yet, despite the walls they both carried, something in him longed to climb hers, even as he feared letting her scale his own. The first time they spoke, really spoke, it was by chance. He found her at the riverside, crouched on the stones, her reflection broken in the rippling current. He approached without meaning to, drawn by the curve of her figure bent toward the water, by the silence that seemed less lonely when she occupied it. She looked up at him with startled eyes, and for a moment he thought she might retreat, might vanish into herself. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as though granting him permission to share the quiet. No words were needed then, only presence. And yet, when the words finally came, they were not casual pleasantries but fragments of truth. She spoke of the river's pull, of how water always found a way forward, no matter the stones in its path. He listened, recognizing the metaphor that lingered beneath her words. He offered no advice, no intrusion, only listened. Sometimes that is what broken souls crave most, to be heard without judgment. After that, their meetings became less accidental. They found each other in places neither had sought before. The market, the riverbank, the narrow lane where dusk painted everything in gold. They learned each other's rhythms, not through grand declarations but through small, quiet exchanges. She told him she liked the smell of rain on dust, and he confessed his weakness for the sound of a fire crackling in the hearth. He made her laugh once, really laugh, and the sound startled them both. It felt like a victory, though he dared not call it that. He dared not call any of it anything, for fear the spell might break. But longing has a way of pressing closer, of demanding acknowledgement. He found himself watching her mouth when she spoke, noticing the way her lips curved, the softness they promised. She, in turn, began to linger in her gaze, to hold his eyes a heartbeat longer than necessary. These were not the gestures of strangers anymore, nor of friends. They were the gestures of two people circling something they did not yet name, two people teetering at the edge of a cliff, unsure if they would fall or fly. The night everything changed. It was not planned. She had invited him to her home, a modest space warmed by candlelight and the scent of jasmine that clung to the curtains. They sat close, the air between them thick with words unspoken. She told him fragments of her past, nothing detailed, nothing precise, but enough for him to understand the shadows that haunted her. He wanted to reach for her, to promise her safety, but he hesitated. She noticed the hesitation, she noticed everything, and then, as though daring him to prove his intentions, she spoke. "Pull my skirt higher." The words cut the silence like lightning, sharp and undeniable. His breath caught. He wanted to refuse, to ask her what she meant, to question if this was truly what she wanted. But his body betrayed him. His hands, trembling yet certain, obeyed. In that moment, it was not about lust. It was about surrender, about trust, about her command not being a command at all, but a plea. Show me you will not leave when you see all of me. Show me you can touch what others broke without breaking me again. And for him, it was not about obedience, but about choosing to step into her darkness, to answer her hunger with his own, to believe for the first time in years that intimacy could heal rather than harm. When his fingers brushed her skin, fire erupted, not wild and uncontrolled, but deep and consuming. It was the fire of recognition, the kind that said, "I know you. I have always known you." Their hunger was real, undeniable. Yet beneath the heat lay something neither could yet name, something fragile and powerful, something that would demand far more than passion in the nights to come. The morning after was not what either of them expected. The sunlight poured into her small home, fragile and golden, touching everything it could reach. He woke first, his body still humming with the memory of her, but his mind restless with questions. She lay beside him, turned slightly away, her hair spilling like ink across the pillow. He studied her for a long moment, searching for regret on her features, but all he found was exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of the body, but of the heart. It struck him then, more sharply than her command the night before. That what they had begun was no simple entanglement. It was a threshold, one they could not step back from. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment they were clear, soft, unguarded. Then he saw the shutters fall, the practiced barriers sliding into place. She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling, silent. He wanted to speak, to tell her she had nothing to fear, but the words felt clumsy in his throat. Instead, he reached for her hand. She let him take it, though her fingers trembled in his. That small act, her allowing him to hold her even when she wanted to retreat, meant more than any spoken vow. In the days that followed, their closeness grew more complicated. They met not with the casual ease of lovers but with the hesitation of two souls who had touched something too sacred to name. She avoided speaking of it, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of shame, and he let her, because he did not yet know how to bridge the silence. But silence has a way of growing louder the longer it goes unbroken. Each glance, each pause, each half-finished sentence built a wall that threatened to undo them. It was during one of those quiet days that the past intruded, shattering whatever fragile peace they had built. She was walking with him near the market when a shadow fell across her path. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried cruelty like a weapon. Her body stiffened, her breath caught, and he saw her hand tremble at her side. The stranger smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes, the kind that promised harm rather than warmth. He spoke her name, slowly, deliberately, as though savoring the taste of it. And in that moment, everything became clear. This was the ghost that had haunted her, the one who had broken her trust, the reason she wore her armor so tightly. The man reached toward her as if he still had a claim, but before he could touch her, she stepped back. Her companion, the man who now stood beside her, shifted instinctively, his body moving between them. The aggressor laughed, a low sound filled with mockery, and murmured something meant only for her ears. She flinched. He saw it, and fury rose in him like a tide. But she placed a hand on his arm, her touch both pleading and restraining. She did not want violence. Not now, not again, so they walked away, but her silence afterward was heavier than stone. That night, when they were alone again, she finally spoke of it. The words came slowly, broken, as though torn from wounds that had never healed. She told him pieces of her story, the way the man had once charmed her, how his charm had soured into cruelty, how she had stayed too long out of fear, how she had finally escaped but never felt free. Every word carried shame, as though she believed herself at fault for the harm inflicted upon her. He listened, his chest tight with anger, but he did not interrupt. He let her speak, let her empty the poison she had swallowed for years. And when she was finished, when her voice cracked and tears traced down her cheeks, he reached for her not with passion but with steady, unyielding care. He told her that her past was not her fault, that the cruelty she endured was not a mark of weakness but a testament to her survival. He said little else, because sometimes love does not need speeches. Sometimes it only needs presence. Yet the presence of her past did not vanish. The man lingered in the town, his shadow stretching long across their days. Rumors spread, whispers of trouble. She withdrew, her laughter fading, her gaze always drifting toward the corners as though expecting him to appear. He, too, felt the weight of it. He knew they could not build anything lasting if this ghost remained unchallenged. But he also knew that this was not his battle to fight alone. He could not slay her demons for her, he could only stand with her while she faced them. The confrontation came sooner than expected. One evening, as dusk bled into night, the man appeared outside her home. He called her name again, louder this time, demanding her attention. She froze, every muscle taut with fear. He stood by her side, his hand steady on hers, and whispered that she did not have to open the door alone. For a long moment, she hesitated. Then, with trembling resolve, she opened it. The man sneered, his words dripping with ownership, with threats disguised as persuasion. But she did not cower this time. She lifted her chin, her voice unsteady yet strong enough to cut through the night. She told him it was over, that whatever hold he once had on her was gone, that she belonged to no one but herself. Her words shook, but they held truth. The aggressor's face darkened, and for a heartbeat it seemed he might lash out. That was when the man beside her stepped forward, not with fists raised, but with presence unyielding, a wall between her and the danger. His silence was louder than any threat. His stance, unwavering, said what words could not: she is not alone anymore. The other man faltered, the confidence in his cruelty crumbling when met with resistance. He spat on the ground, muttered a curse, and finally turned away, disappearing into the night. The air that remained was heavy, but it was no longer poisoned with fear. She sagged against the doorframe, shaking, and he caught her before she fell. She buried her face against his chest, not from weakness but from release, as though she had been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. In the days that followed, something shifted between them. She no longer wore her armor so tightly. Her smiles came easier, her laughter truer. She began to trust that he would not vanish at the first sign of darkness. And he, for his part, felt the hunger he once feared transform into something deeper, steadier. It was not just desire now, it was devotion. It was the choice to stay, again and again, no matter how heavy the burden. When she whispered once more, "Pull my skirt higher," her voice was softer, gentler, no longer a command but an invitation. And when his hands obeyed, they did not tremble with fear or burn with untamed hunger. They moved with love, with reverence, with the knowledge that what they shared was no longer fragile. It was a fire, yes, but one that warmed rather than destroyed. Together, they had walked through shadows and come out on the other side. Together, they had chosen each other, not out of desperation, but out of courage. And for the first time in both their lives, the hunger in their hearts finally found its answer.